Well, joining us now is Elliot Reid, who's trying to change the narrative around Black history. He's the founder of Black History School. Elliot, it's so good to have you in the studio.
It's nice to meet you, Alex. I need to apologise. I came straight from work and I thought I had a change of clothes. I looked in my bag, realised that I didn't.
You look revitalised.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Fine. Don't you worry about that. I'm no fashion police here. But apparently, perhaps we need fashion police when it comes to things like cultural appropriation. Explain to me how you would outline it, how you would frame the concept of cultural appropriation.
I think, to be honest, cultural appropriation is a superficial look at what is quite clearly underlying narratives, and it would be more important to look at the underlying narratives than to look at the superficial narratives around cultural appropriation. Culture, by definition, would be an individual or a group of people passing something down which isn't linked to, say, their genetic code. So when you broaden that term, you see that we have inherited so many great things by culture, or even by innovation which has been passed from people to people. For example, in England, we like to stay on time. Time or clocks was originally a Chinese innovation. We use an Indian mathematical system. Many of the words that we have are Arabic. Our religion is Middle Eastern for a lot of us. So culture is meant to spread. It has spread for a long time. It's benefited us as a species by culture spreading. So I don't think that when we talk about cultural appropriation, we're speaking about sharing of culture. We can move that to one side. What we're actually talking about is what you alluded to before, which is potentially the power imbalances which are at play. And to talk about cultural appropriation, I think, is either getting our foot in the door to more important discussions that need to take place, or it might even be a form of fighting a ground which some individuals feel like we can win when others are a far bigger battle, or you might even look at it as a battle within a war.
I mean, the difficulty with all of this is that there aren't any sort of clear-cut rules on the matter, and it does seem to be subjective. And I think a lot of people who potentially are accused of appropriating a culture wouldn't necessarily think they're doing something to be insensitive or to be offensive. So how do we navigate this really difficult minefield of offence?
Let me throw a question back at you. How palpable do you feel the tensions surrounding cultural appropriation would be without the internet?
Well, no, I think it wouldn't exist. But It's interesting you raise that point, because what I would see is cultural appropriation has come about because increasingly people are beginning to adopt and imitate other people's cultures in a global society where we can travel to different countries, and people now do go on gap years in exotic places that a few decades ago they wouldn't have. So it seems to me both the adoption of the attributes and assets of other cultures and then the finding that to be insensitive is a very modern development.
No, but it's not a modern. It's definitely not a modern development. I mean, you could look back to medieval Europe and see that a lot of our fashion descended from a man called Ziryab, who was a Moor, so a descendant of a member of the African, Berber and Middle Eastern empire of the Moors, which he introduced everything from many things from fine dining to different seasons, different seasonal wear. So it's not a modern thing. Cultural adaptation has occurred for a long period of time. But if we don't, once again, pay attention to the power imbalance, we're really missing the point. The reason why cultural appropriation is an issue is because the underlying narrative is, one, have you not taken enough from us already? The second might be, you want to listen to our music, but you don't want to go to the places where the music is originating from, or you don't want to dance with the people who made the music. That's the underlying narrative, that you want pieces of us, but not us in our entirety. And that is the underlying narrative to cultural appropriation that needs to be focused on.
So I'm going to try and put this into sort of practical, empirical terms. I lived in Kenya for a year and loved living in Kenya, and was a regular at the various Maasai markets that pop up around the country, and actually was gifted a lot of things by my Kenyan colleagues and friends. And these are things that I would love to be able to wear, love to be able to exhibit. But would that make me insensitive were I, as a white woman, where my forefathers have oppressed Kenyans and oppressed the Maasais, would it therefore be insensitive if either in Kenya or in the UK I did wear, say, a Maasai choker that I'd been given while living in Kenya?
So you're saying that you are directly descendant of individuals who oppressed Kenyans?
Well, I don't know if I am. I've never done my lineage.
Well, then they're not your forefathers then? When we look at the majority of English people, if the majority of English people have benefited by proxy from empire, not directly, it was a decentralisation of Britain, which then led to the enrichment of the merchant classes, who are then able to be taxed by the crown or by the government, which then by proxy benefited English people. And I think that's one thing that needs to be put across, is that what is it? You don't inherit the sins of the father, but you do inherit the wealth which has been left to you by your forefathers, all right, or by your nation. I think that's a far more forgiving way to look at it. Now, when it comes to that question which once again, it's playing on the anecdotal, it's playing on you as an individual, rather than something which is more systemic. So once again, I do feel like it's still missing the point by focusing on you as an individual, rather than the system. However, I'll answer your question, all right? I think that we as individuals need to do what we can to balance the injustices that we see. If we can all do that, then on average the world will be a better place. So once again, I'll then put the question back to you, that yes, you have quite rightly extracted certain cultural tokens from, say, native Kenyans, and then I would ask you, do you understand the meaning of what you've purchased? And then also, what have you done to try and balance that imbalance, or that power imbalance that might be occurring?
Well, I do understand in terms of when I've been given Maasai fashions, how they're made, because I've stayed in Maasai villages and seen them being crafted, and then, paid very good amounts of money for them, probably more than the asking price, as I think most people often tend to do. And where I've been given things, I mean, when I used to live in Ghana, one of my best friends, Rashida, every time she comes to the UK, comes with a suitcase full of things from markets in Accra and Kumasi that she thinks I will like. And I used to, about 10 years ago, happily wear these things with impunity. And now, like I said, I'd be worried about doing so. Now, you said, have I tried to address injustices or imbalances? I suppose in my own way, I think I do. I think having been someone who's lived in Africa a lot and contributed to their economy and to their society, then I would hope that I've done my best to regard people as egalitarian. But it does make it very different. I mean, let's look at the Jessy Nelson case, because that's been a big headline story recently, where her former bandmate, particularly Leanne Pincock, who of course is a black artist, has said that Jessy was going out of her way to try and look black in the music video Boys. Did you understand the outrage around that? I mean, should we be cross with Jessy Nelson, or was that sort of fabricated?
Kind of. So first of all, I'm going to come back to one point which you mentioned, right, about your interaction with the Kenyans. It sounds like you had a very happy, informal contractual agreement with the Kenyans who you were working with, right? So who am I as a black Brit, someone who's of Jamaican descent, not even Kenyan descent, to pass judgment on that interaction? It sounds like you had two willing parties who agreed what was right, and then you came to a happy agreement for both parties. If so, that sounds great to me. Now, when it comes to Jessy Nelson, I found it difficult to empathise with individuals who are claiming cultural appropriation, and the only reason, or let's call it, was it blackfishing? Was it blackfishing?
Blackfishing.
Right. Jessy Nelson doesn't look like any member of my family. Not one. In fact, if you were to put her in a family photo, she'd stand out like a sore thumb. So the idea that she's trying to look black, to me, is a little bit, is a bit far-fetched. Yeah, absolutely, we can have a look at minstrel shows and things like that, where, yeah, it's an obvious intention to try and take the mick out of black people and look like that. But with Jessy Nelson, I found it difficult to empathise with people who were trying to make that point. But also, for me, as someone who is descendant of Jamaica and the West African diaspora, I can think of just such great things to be thankful for from my culture that can't be replicated as easy as a makeover or some plastic surgery. My culture runs so deep and it is so rich that you can't replicate it with a makeover. So that's where I stand on that.
And thank you so much for coming in, Elliot. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your very candid views on this complicated topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.